Welcome back to Trading 360. I'm Nicole Petalides. Time for the big three. Three stocks, three charts, three trades. Rick Ducat will take us through the charts. Here to take us through the trades, Charles Moon, Prosper Trading Academy. Good Friday morning to you both. I'm glad you're here. Before we get to the big picture, Charles Moon, some of your thoughts as we are seeing some nice moves today. All the major averages gaining over 1%. The Dow's up 500 points. We just saw a NASDAQ composite high this week as well. I mean, that's worth noting. Some of your thoughts.
Yeah, this talk about a week of volatility. It started with Google earnings, just blowing the roof off of expectations. And then a bit of a disappointment the following day with Meta and Microsoft. And then, of course, yesterday, Amazon, which is helping propel the NASDAQ today, again, exploded to the upside, pushing on their 52-week highs. And that's the thing, we've seen the Dow and the SPY make new 52-week highs in the last month, but the Qs ran up to those levels, faded off a bit. And that's where we're seeing a bit of a struggle. And it's leading up to the election, we expected a little bit of volatility, a little bit of money shifting around. But, seeing how tech continue to fail, especially after being the early leader of 2024 and bringing this market up to these levels, it's a bit disappointing. Obviously, this has a lot to do with the semiconductors and the Magnificent Seven overall. But if we could get that one final push in the NASDAQ, I just believe that this market is really primed to make a really, really big move, even in the light of yields rising here. Something's got to give, and that's kind of where we're at right now. We're almost at this make or break moment for the markets.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Broadcom. Why is this one on your list today, Charles?
Out of the semiconductors, has been by far one of the best performers this year. They've been holding up pretty steady overall. Still, subjected to bouts of volatility as the entire sector has with the recent news. But, this is a name that I was really eyeing this morning, right around 167. They hit 167.50 to the penny, which tells me that's institutional interest. And them holding this barrier, it really becomes a low risk, high reward, near term trade. I love the rebound idea right back towards right around 176, 177 near term. It's a small little gap to fill. That's really where they're kind of holding before they unraveled yesterday. They held and defended yesterday's lows. They hit that really key pinpoint number of 67.5. I really love this as a dip to rip idea right back up to 177 near term. So I think this is something to be on the watch up until next week, the end of next week, right into that 177 price.
Ooh, okay. Let's take a look, Rick, at the charts, please.
Yeah, we've had our eye on some similar areas, it seems here, but just to kind of describe what's been going on in this name, you can see that we've enjoyed a pretty nice rally. We're up about 96% off of those 52-week lows that were almost a year ago. So now you can see that we had this pretty consistent trend line going across the lows in white here. We did have a couple of notable dips to the downside, and they very quickly recovered, and we're back, within the same boundary that we've been in play with for most of the year here. However, a bit of a failure here. So we did make new highs beyond the previous highs, right around 185 or so, but not really anything to write home about. And we've been backing off since then. Fell below 21-day EMA, finding some support today at the orange 63-day EMA. RSI also faltering a little bit here. We are below the 50 midline. We are trending downward here. But to speak to some specific price levels, green line here, 166, very close to that 167 area Charles was talking about. You can see it's a frequent stopping point for price here, so that stood out to me, for that reason here. Beyond that, we've got our trend line and a volume node, so right around maybe 160 would be where things would start to be noticeable to the downside there for potential support. To the upside, 177, red line right here, another frequent stopping point for price, lines up pretty closely with our downward trend line there. That was the other kind of area Charles was talking about as well. So the green line and the red line that we have right here, those are the areas in question.
You know, Broadcom currently supplies over 300 million Wi-Fi BT chips per year, and the analyst was saying that Apple will reduce its reliance on Broadcom. That's on the other side of this trade, but I thought it was, this was on the 31st, yesterday. One of the analysts talked about maybe Apple, sort of pulling back a little bit using Broadcom. But meantime, I mean, we see the upside potential, and it is trading higher. Final thoughts, Charles?
Yeah, and certainly that had a pretty devastating effect. The stock had dropped pretty hard yesterday, as a lot of tech names did. But this is kind of what I was looking for. This is still a name that is, obviously tied to the most important tech sector within the Nasdaq, and certainly on a day where Amazon has set this market least in the tech in the tech sector higher. This is one of those names that I was just looking for a short-term, to be a short-term benefit of that upside demand. And that's really what I'm looking at here right now. In terms of the markets, it almost seems like we have to react very swiftly. There's obviously news that's been affecting the energy sector, the tech sector. And, in these moments, a lot of the times, a lot of people, especially investors, tend to go risk off and have cash on the sidelines. So, looking at it from a, short-term trading standpoint, all I'm looking for right now is to be swift and in and out of this market.
Right. All right. Let's talk about Lulu, which has been a laggard year to date. Is there upside potential here, Charles?
Yeah, this has been in a devastating downtrend, and this has been one of the strongest performers, especially relative to the retail sector. Lulu is a name that I have long compared to, like Chipotle and Apple. Certainly, the idea is that they have this really strong built-in foundation of loyalists, people that are always constantly interested in their new products, buying their new products, and, really consistent in relation to, being a, every monthly, every quarterly consumer, and it just has this ecosphere of demand. And, seeing this devastating pullback, it just, for me, looking at it from a short-term, long-term picture, I thought there was great value. Short-term, we have seen the pivot and the trend reversal taking place. Longer term, obviously, there's tremendous upside. I believe this has been a really steady riser over the last few months. They've been really consistent and strong. And today they are just absolutely just breaking out to the upside. And this is one that I was looking for a retracement back to 313. We're already trading through that level. Now I'm looking for a target right up to around 330 in the near term. And above 330, it really opens the door for them to recover and kind of go for that massive, massive upside gap fill. That's not going to happen anytime soon, but getting above that 330 threshold, that could go a really long way in anticipating that big time recovery in this name. So this is one of those names that's on my radar as a bull play, both short term and long term.
Yeah. And Guggenheim has a 350 target and a buy rating. Let's see what Rick says about the charts.
A chart that has definitely taken a hit here. We're down 39% off those highs, but a nice day to be sure today because we're up about 5.5%. And when we look at the chart, we kind of can see there's a few key areas. First of all, just general observation, looks kind of like a cup and handle type shape forming up to me here with this kind of gradual bottoming out, kind of rounding shape here. What you would expect if you're bullish and you're trying to play this pattern would be a push up to this resistance area between around 330 or so, kind of one of the areas we mentioned here, then a brief rejection and then a push back to the upside, giving us this kind of coffee cup type shape here. Anyway, just something to consider here. But green line right here, low point, subsequent high point. Subsequent high points once again. That's where we broke above recently. That's where we retested yesterday. Now the rally is continuing to the upside. We're pushing above our volume profile, point of control, our area of heaviest trading here. That brings us up to the first area of our resistance kind of zone here around 322. That was where our gap started. That was about where we kept closing here. We did have this intraday movement here, but quickly rejected. That was about where we closed once again here. So around 322 would be the first point to watch to the upside here. Then we've got 252-day EMA and the high point of that kind of an anomaly candle that I mentioned there. So around 327, 337, those would be some upside areas to watch here. RSI kind of stuck, trending upward here, but unable to kind of break out into that overbought area. Momentum favoring the bulls, though, to be sure, in this situation here. If we were to break to the downside, we've got our moving averages here, yellow 21-day, in line with the upper boundary of this kind of rising wedge type shape here, and also our green trend price level there. So 295 to the downside, and then maybe 270 or so to further to the downside for additional support.
All right. Any final thoughts here? Thank you for that, Rick. Any final thoughts, Charles, on this name?
Yeah, I just don't want people to forget how great of a performer this stock really was. And for short-term traders, we always look for momentum and opportunity. We look for value, and then we look for demand. And this stock has really just shown that profile. And again, when we look at it from a short-term perspective, there's a lot of open upside space without any quote-unquote technical obstruction. And then when we get to like the kind of psychological standpoint of looking at long-term investments and where opportunity really lies, especially in this bullish market environment, most stocks are trading at or near their 52-week highs. This is not a low-quality company. This is a company with a very strong, and very sustained, brand power. They have continued to innovate. They have continued to draw in demand. Every time I go to their stores, there's a line out the door or a line at the register, people buying their products. And as long as that sustains, I just believe the recovery is in play.
All right. Last but not least, take a look here at CleanSpark, which is incredible. When you look 1 year, it's up 160, almost 165%. Year to date hasn't done much because it's flat and off the highs of $24. But in the world of Bitcoin and mining, this is where we find CleanSpark. Tell me a little bit about where you think this stock could be headed quickly, Charles.
Yeah. So, for me, what's really critical in the near term is that sustains around this 1030 price. This is an old high level acting as support. There's the 50-day moving average just below it. People are always associating, why is the miners recovering like, or moving like MSTR and Coinbase? We need to realize that the Bitcoin halving actually wasn't great for the miners. But there's the thing, if we break those all-time highs in Bitcoin, well, the idea of them making that move to 100,000, 125,000, all these extreme numbers that that have been presented from the crypto analysts and crypto world. Michael Saylor was talking about Bitcoin being worth millions of dollars. Well, he's obviously doing his best to try and facilitate it, right? He's trying to constrain supply. He's raising up capital up to $42 billion, I believe, to buy more. And that's the thing. This is somewhat of an election play. If Trump does get elected, it's going to be really good for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's not going to stop at the all-time highs. And they are a momentum asset because of the constrained flow. So they could effectively really rise quickly to 100,000, 150,000, 250,000. And once we start seeing Bitcoin really work towards those metrics, and it's going to be a really big benefit for names like CLSK and Mara. So, short term, I want to see it stay above this 1030 price. I believe it's a quick retracement back to 13, 14. And if it breaks above 14, skies open up towards, the upper teens, maybe even low 20s near term.
All right, Charles, thanks for that. Let's take a look at what Rick says about the technicals. Rick.
So for a chart that has so much volatility, it spends a lot of time being kind of range bound here. So we are up like 217% off the lows, but we're also down like 56% or so off the highs. But look here, you can see kind of this very prolonged period, like 2 quarters basically, of just bouncing in between our red line and our pink line between like 1350 to 2050. Broke down, haven't really been able to recover. Once again in a range though, you can see now between our green line and our red line about 810 or so to 1350 once again here. Moving averages clustered together, speaking to lack of a clear trend direction here. 1050 seems like an important area. It's this blue line that I have a shaded area drawn around it. Frequent stopping point for price seems to be kind of a pivot area here where the trend kind of changes here. But a couple volume nodes to watch out for, but support at 812, 810 around that area. Further support at these previous lows here near 641. Resistance, all our moving averages to get through, and then 1350 is the next stop, volume profile point of control, and then eventually 2050 repeated ceiling.
All right, I'm going to leave it right there. That was a great big three. Thank you so much. We looked at Broadcom, Lululemon, and CleanSpark today. Charles Moon, Prosper Trading Academy. Thank you, Charles. And Rick Ducat there on the charts.